Welcome back to our LinkedIn Ecommerce Exchange. Today, I have the pleasure of sitting down with our Director of Lifecycle Marketing, Lisa.
Hey, thanks, Nicole. Excited to be here and talk about one of the most under-leveraged growth levers in e-commerce.
Preach, Lisa. Happy to have you here. So getting into it, I guess, how would you define lifecycle? How do you define that?
Great question. So in a nutshell, lifecycle is retention. So you're thinking about email, SMS, loyalty, and all the things that go into that. So the practice of engaging your customer through their full journey, that's why we call it life cycle. So before, during, and after their first purchase. So at its core, we're really converting site traffic, retaining customers, and growing the value over time. And again, we're really focusing in on email and SMS, but it also can apply if you have a app with notifications or you're looking at other channels pertinent to your brand. So right now where CAC is just continuously rising and margins are tighter, we're really looking at retention as a way to increase profitability. And it's really the most profitable channel in the mix, right? So it's scalable, it's measurable, it's owned, which is definitely rare, in digital today.
Yeah, I would agree. I think this is a really hot topic right now as media budgets are pressured, right? When brands are focusing on profitability, when demand is going down, right? The need for life cycle, and I'm going to say free in quotes because it's not necessarily free. Obviously, there's work to go into it, but continuously not having to pay for your email efforts or the different channels that you're talking about is definitely a big win right now. When you're thinking about the different tactics, what are you seeing working over the last 90 days?
So there's a lot going on in this season. And really, I would say, no matter what's going on, globally, we're really looking at four major tactics that are more evergreen, but will be fine-tuned depending on what situation you're in. So first would be nurturing. So looking at new subscribers, right? So all that traffic you're bringing in through your acquisition tactics, those will convert faster with personalized and well-timed flow. So some of our brands are seeing a tremendous input from the flows, right? So maybe 60% of their email SMS revenue is coming from flows because it's super targeted, right? So you're thinking about all of the things that are specific to the information you got, where they came to your site, they browsed a number of pages, they signed up for email. You have all that data behind it, so you can do a really custom message. So that leads to the next one, upsell and repurchase. So once you've converted those contacts, now you can move one-time buyers through into that next cycle, thinking about replenishment and cross-sell campaigns. So if you have a product that's sort of a one and done, where maybe you have additional models or add-ons, you can still, craft a message that's more on a flow sort of cycle, right? Where you expect them to break into the product and then 30 days later, they might need something for it. Or you have those replenishables like a lot of the beauty care products that we work with.
Or CPG,
yeah,
right?
CPG for sure. Yeah, we definitely see a lot of awesome repeat business and think about lifetime value in that way for replenishment. Those are the rosy ones, right? Those are the like all the feel good. Win back is a little bit more scary. So identifying at-risk customers, and we really want to think about how to re-engage them before they churn. There are some cool features that are in play nowadays where we can look at a customer's profile, and based on patterns of behavior, we can see who's likely to churn and then address that before it happens. And so, we still fine tune everything. We want to go through and make sure it makes sense for a product. There are some brands we work with where it is a longer life cycle, maybe different sizes of a product, right? And so we still go through and we make sure everything lines up and then use the intel from the brands we work with and really have them lead on, what is the best cycle for this product.
So how would you define at-risk customer? Is it like customers who you have a average life cycle of a customer, and then if there's customers that are going outside of that where they haven't purchased, are those the ones that you would say are at risk?
Yes, exactly. So let's say we identify that Nicole loves chocolate. Okay, great. So now you become we got you to the site through one of the various paid medias or maybe organic influence, and we got you onto the site. You buy your chocolate bar, and then you would probably get your, if it's a best case scenario, you get your first purchase email. We might send you an email that says, hey, leave a review. And then you love it so much when you ran out on your own, you came back and you repurchased. Okay. Now you wouldn't necessarily qualify for all the same triggers because you're a second time buyer. And so if there's this dormant period where, let's say it's 6 weeks and you haven't ordered any more chocolate, we should probably get in touch with you and figure out what's going on. And we do that through a number of different strategies where, or tactics where it's, here's a promotional offer. Hey, is it, did you see this new thing that we came out with? Maybe it's, chocolate with peanut butter, whatever it needs to be in order to get you to come back. The fourth one would be scale. And that's probably the most important, right? So we can use segmentation and messaging frameworks. It lets us do everything at volume without losing personalization. And with the engines working behind the scenes, we can personalize messages. Again, once we have that segmentation piece in place, now we can customize based on some past purchase, maybe some activity on the website or where they came from. Maybe if they're a lead from Instagram, we could pull that into the messaging and be very specific and then tailor the content within the email.
And I'm sure that messaging, the different types of messaging probably resonates differently with each customer and maybe even time of the year. What type of messages are you seeing resonate well with customers right now? Is it different than in other periods? I'm kind of leading the witness here, Lisa. I'm mostly saying like with demand potentially being down, right? Goodness. Is there certain messaging that works?
Yeah, sure. So I would say there are some trends where people are taking more time to decide. There's definitely a lot more information out in the world and as a consumer, right? To try and decide, okay, what is my opportunity cost if I buy this model versus that, or, that sort of, I don't know if I'd call it like leisure spending, but you know what I mean? There's not really a splurge situation going on right now. We were just talking with a client about Black Friday, Cyber Monday planning, and we are seeing that, people, if it's something they want, they won't necessarily wait for a promotion. If it's something they aren't sure on, you have to think about how you're going to discount because you really have to make a compelling case of value right now. And that's the kind of messages that are resonating. And it doesn't have to be a discount, Nicole. It would have to be, this has 5 stars. Other people like you are really happy they got this, right? And from us, right? Not from somebody else. So yeah, you really have to do some educational and value sort of propositions.
Got it. What type of tactics are you seeing not working well right now that maybe have previously worked well or maybe used to be best practices and aren't so much today?
Yeah, it's a great question. We definitely find a lot of brands that have set up all the things. So as in flows, they're sending once a week. They feel they're checking all the boxes. And there were competitors that, didn't check all the boxes. So you're going to be at the top of the inbox. You're going to be driving that visibility. But now a lot of people are getting smarter with their marketing. And I think there's a lot of tools and honestly, just smart marketers who are figuring out, what are the pieces that come into play. So it's been a really cool experience to see some of the brands that we work with there, at the enterprise level where, we have a whole team dedicated to this. And then they call us and they're like, okay, you see across the board, across brands, across industries, like what would take us to the next level. So we really can't do generic flows anymore. You can't do out of the box templates. And we can't see, hi friend, you left your cart. You'd be surprised. We still see some things where it's dear, and then there's a blank, and then there's a comma, so things like that are still out there. And, everybody just has to step it up right now.
Right. That makes sense. Can you talk a little bit about the tools that you're using? So you mentioned AI and how you're leveraging that. What are those and have they changed over time?
Subject line testers. So like 8-part subject line test. You obviously needed quite a big audience to do something like that, but it was very emotion based, right? So you could decide, before it went live, you could decide if the subject lines were on brand, and then you could see how different segments would react. And so now that is incorporated into a lot of different ESPs where you can think through, what kind of subject line testing do we want to do? Do we want to do direct or indirect when it's related to a promotion, have some mystery or not, and fine tune things. So subject line testing is like a no brainer. The other thing that we're seeing are segments, right? So using the segmentation within the platform. So we are really active in Klaviyo and Amarsis. So both are really cool ESPs for different reasons. And so just being able to drill down into audiences doesn't take as much manual work now, right? So if you know how to make use of the tool and the platform and get through into the nitty gritty of the data, you can get some really cool granular segments where you may have a message going to fewer people, but the conversion rate is off the charts.
Gotcha. And for those that are not that familiar with the life cycle acronyms, what is
Oh my
ESP?
gosh, email service platform.
Um, Another thing that's been coming up right now is kind of like balancing the different sales or promo periods across different platforms. So, for example, obviously a lot of brands engaging in Prime Day, right? And one of the questions that always comes up is during this very big tentpole event on the platform where we know Amazon's going to be kind of seeing a huge increase in traffic. How do brands balance that with D2C? So, what's your take on that? And how does Lifecycle come into those types of tentpole moments that have happened on either other retail channels or maybe even brick and mortar? What's the balance there?
Great question. Yeah, I've worked with a lot of brick and mortar stores that have to think about this is someone who's joined our email list, but has potentially purchased before, right? They may have found us in store, they may have ordered us through Amazon, like you mentioned. So, until they self identify, you don't exactly know that. So, when you're looking at messaging, and nobody, I don't know about you, Nicole, I've never been mad at a brand emailing me like I've never bought it in store. They're not going to know that, right? So, you can still do some of your more broadcast type of messages where you're offering things to your entire audience. Again, like education and promotions, those are all safe bets. But when you're looking at your content and you have that ability to pull in the data from, maybe you take it from your register, right? And you like take that data from the store and you upload that and you match up, then you can have a much smarter audience. And I mean, that goes for any data channel, right? So if you're looking at paid ads and just matching up that information, that is just fantastic. So we can then, look at it from a purchaser, non-purchaser perspective, and then suppress recent purchasers if we're doing a deep discount to really engage new contacts and get people into the fold. Yeah.
Have you ever done any tests where you're driving traffic to a different retailer like Amazon or a different online retailer versus driving it to the website?
Yes. Yeah. I love this question because I just had this conversation earlier today. So our brands that we work with typically fall into multiple buckets. I think about three, right? So you have the brand that has just the D2C store and they want to capitalize on traffic from something like Prime Days, right? So they will talk about their promotion that is so great that it doesn't matter that Amazon's over here doing its thing. So you really, you can double down on your messaging, again, using your value propositions, being very specific about your position in the market, why us over them. And then you have the brands that are using a .com and have an Amazon presence, or maybe they're in the Walmart, marketplace. And so those messages, you could drive traffic to Amazon and you can use your email, SMS, all the typical channels to drive traffic to that. If you're doing that, I would say the most successful brands we've worked with have exclusives on Amazon, right? So like the products are only on Amazon that are part of the sale. And then after the sale, again, you kind of need them to self-identify, but then you could follow up and say, hey, like, did you find what you like? Or do you want to try out these alternatives that we have on the .com? So then you can balance it really nicely, right? I would say those are the big two. There are some that kind of fall in between where, they've started on Amazon, they're building up their D2C and it's just not there yet. So there's, again, different variations. And you mentioned like other marketplaces, maybe they're on retail and they're still trying to figure it out. So we work with brands, coming from all backgrounds.
Got it. Yeah, I'm seeing trends on the Amazon side where there's a focus on external traffic going to these PDPs from off Amazon sources versus in the platform or in the site, right? And I think a big piece of that is like direct links out of email and SMS, right? Not just social or other alternative channels. So that definitely is a trend I'm seeing. And then the other thing that I'm seeing is that brands are getting, as you mentioned, right, a little bit more comfortable sharing their 1P data, I would say. Not that they're sharing their 1P data directly with Amazon, but they're using their 1P data to drive sales across all channels, not just on their D2C, right? So balancing those, you got to figure out the attribution a little bit, right? But overall, I've seen that to work well. And I'm glad to see the channels start to work together, because I think historically we've seen them always be separate and almost in competition. And I definitely don't think it needs to be that way.
Yeah, I would say the other thing that we found, you had asked about AI, so looking at the content within emails. So not just, so subject lines and segmentation is sort of that. Honestly, I wouldn't call the segmentation part basic, but I think everybody thinks of those things right away, right? Because it's very mechanical when you get into a data spreadsheet and you start, Nicole's a purchaser. Like, but when you look at the content of the messages as well, and then you start to analyze, what is going to resonate with particular demographics, or what content is going to be driving the most engagement. I would say go over past campaign data. So as I mentioned, we have brands that have been through Prime days before, right? So we're pulling together all the data to create dashboards and then understand the trends from that higher level that our clients are asking us for.
Thank you for joining and all the insights. Of course, this has been awesome. Any last tips, tricks that brands should be thinking about right now?
I appreciate the time, Nicole. I would say when you're not thinking about life cycle, it's a missed opportunity, especially when it comes to growing your list. So I would say, I have some brands that come to us where they're kind of scared to start sending email, but they've been collecting email addresses. Great. Like, continue to collect email addresses. I would say you have to send at some point, and we're here to help you with that. You can't just cold send to a huge list. So I would say keep that in mind, like keep growing the list and be strategic in your send.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Nicole.